This is Captain's Log with your host, Captain Mark Gray. Welcome aboard.
Sea tales are true stories that could save your life. So watch Captain's Log next.
Racing at 140 miles per hour. It's all in a day's work for world champion race driver Bill Seabolt. When Bill's not racing, he's out pleasure boating, following the safe boating rules. He knows that over half the boating accidents are alcohol-related. That's why it's against the law to operate a boat while intoxicated. Take Bill's advice.
Next time you're on the water, think before you drink, and don't forget to put on one of these.
Smart skippers stay sober. A boating safety message from the United States Coast Guard.
I think it means feet. Ahoy there, mates. May I give you two a word of advice?
Skipper!
I spent many years on a deserted island, and one of the important things I learned is don't leave the harbor without knowing the boat or the rules of safe boating. You can learn them, too, by taking the free instruction sailboat course from the squadron. Here. The squadron won't leave you stranded.
Guest is Mr. Bill Ebert. He'll be telling us a sea tale, a true story. But first, Bill, could you tell me a little bit about your boating experience, past history?
Well, we've actually been in boating now for about 32, 33 years, and this is really our 12th boat. 8 of them were power boats and 4 sailboats in the middle. But as you get a little older, you get back into power boats, a little easier. Now this is a Californian, the Netty, a 44-foot Sports Express that will cruise along at about 22, 23 knots and has a top speed of about 28 knots. So it'll get you where you're going in a hurry.
Yeah, it looks like a very nice boat. I understand you have a sea tale for us, a true story with a safety message. Could you go into that?
Oh, you bet. One time, a while back, we had a boat where we were on our way to Newport Beach from Channel Islands, and as we approached Los Angeles Harbor, there was a freighter coming out, so we took it off of autopilot, and my wife was driving, and she said, gee, the boat seems to be very hard to steer, and we noticed it had been slowing down a little bit. But in a following sea, it's a little difficult to visualize or feel the difference between 16 knots and 18 knots.
For our non-boating friends out there watching the show, could you explain a following sea?
Following sea means the sea is pushing you. The current is coming behind you at the transom. So you have a little less steering control.
So like here's the stern or back of the boat, and the waves tend to
Push
hit
it.
That and make it yaw back and forth.
A lot of times you think that might be what it is. My wife steering said to me, this is really getting difficult to steer. And so I looked at the rudder angle indicator. That's an indicator that tells you the direction of the rudders. And the rudder angle indicator indicated we were turning, but the boat was really going straight. So I immediately said, there's something's on the rudder. So I went right down in the engine compartment, and with a very large explanation, quite loud, my wife said, is it on fire? And I said, no, we're taking on water. And at that time, we probably had 500 gallons of water in the bilge. And so immediately I could see where it was coming from, had her shut that one engine off, and in shutting off the engine, it stopped the flow of water coming in. But it was coming in at the rate of about 50 gallons a minute. So in 10 minutes' time, you've accumulated a lot of water. So the next thing is, she said, do I call the Coast Guard? And I said, no, let's call Newport, where they were expecting us. Got a hold of them, told them to stand by, we had a problem, and that we may need some assistance, and we may need them to call the Coast Guard. But having got the water shut off to where there was no more water coming in, it was just a matter of getting all the pumps going to get it all out. Even though you have automatic bilge pumps, sometimes the debris in the bottom of the boat collects around them, and that's lesson number 1. Keep that bilge clean, because that's the only way you can get that water out. So it took probably 40 minutes to get the water out, and in that period of time we were running on one engine. In the meantime, I was able to take a stainless steel clamp off of the generator, put it back on this one that had broken, and then got the second engine going again and proceeded on to Newport Beach. And of course, by the time we got there were a lot of people waiting to solve the problem, and that really got solved. But there are so many things that you can get into.
I understand that was a new boat that you'd picked up and you're taking it home, right?
That was a new boat, right?
And what caused the clamp to break? And I mean, on a new boat, you would assume that everything's tip-top and brand new.
Actually, it was an installation problem where in the manufacturing of the particular engine, there were some fittings that should have been turned a little further apart than were, to where they were really rubbing on that stainless steel clamp. Difficult to really see. It had been a very difficult thing to have spotted until it happened. But when it happens, believe me, it happens.
So basically, this clamp was around the hose that takes water in from the ocean to cool your engine.
That is correct.
And it was set up just a little bit off on the wrong angle where it rubbed against something else that cut right through it.
Cut right through a stainless steel clamp.
And it didn't take long at all.
No, that was from vibration. But once you get a problem like that, you learn many things about the boat that's probably very helpful. And it was very lucky because this particular day was a very calm day. The seas were very gentle. If you were out and you had real rough water and you have that kind of an emergency, it's more difficult.
But all that water is movable ballast that would slosh around in there and could conceivably capsize you rather easily.
Very easily, and you don't really have much control.
So one good lesson might be that even though you have a new boat, you want to assume that you have to work out some bugs. I mean, not that I have this beautiful new boat and what could be more safe, than this. And you really have to be quite creative when things go awry. I understand that you cannibalize the clamp from a non-essential area to jury-rig that, right?
The biggest thing is not getting too excited. Keep your cool, find out what the problem is, and then start to solve it.
In any way you can. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's where a lot of preventative maintenance and things of that sort, and doing safety drills like your man overboard drills, actually going out there and doing the drills and thinking about what if this incident or situation arises, how would I handle that? And do I have the proper extra tools and gizmos to do that type of thing? Perhaps you could tell us some of the maintenance tips that you have, or perhaps do you carry a variety of clamps now? Or
well, we have, of course, carry a variety of clamps, and the main thing, though, is to be sure the bilges are kept clean, because debris in the bilge collects around the pump, and then it's difficult for it to really discharge that water. But you were saying a moment ago about the man overboard thing, and you can take a plastic jar and throw it overboard and then learn to come on and approach it. Because the biggest thing, if anybody ever goes overboard, is to immediately throw anything you can get your hands on that'll float, because then you've got a location. Many times it's very difficult to spot somebody once they've fallen over.
I've noticed I've had buoys out and different things that, in a small, short 2-foot sea, little tiny waves.
Very difficult to see.
They're lost. You have to get right up on them. And actually, you should throw something with international colors on it because it'll stand out quite a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, this is life ring here. That's what it's for. It's to throw out, not necessarily for him to hold on to, but for you to be able to spot him.
But again, that's white, and on
it's
white
more
caps,
difficult.
it might be more difficult.
Be better
to
in
see.
orange.
That's why a lot of them are orange.
You bet.
I carry a red bag on my boat, my sailboat and powerboat,
Right.
and if someone should fall over, or if we have to abandon ship, I just take the bag and throw it in, and it has a flotation in it, and it has your wallet, some emergency gear and stuff. A spare, life vest and all that those kind of things. So I think it might be a good idea if people did have a bag of that sort, the things that you want with you should the boat sink.
Absolutely.
Do you have a short safety tip for us, a real quick 10-second, some kind of message to the people?
Be prepared. Be prepared. Always be looking for an emergency landing.
And things that are totally out of the ordinary, totally unexpected.
Those are the things that sneak up and catch you.
And if you're prepared, you can make the difference between perhaps survival and keeping your boat afloat or a disaster. I do appreciate you being here, sir. And we'll be back with our next Sea Tales guest right after this.
I claim the new world in the name of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand.
Am I glad we made it? The Atlantic sure is rough this time of year.
What do you mean you're glad we made it? You didn't think we would? After all, I took a boating course. Teaches you to have fun with your boat safely. If you want more information, call 1 800-336-BOAT on the telephone.
All right, Skipper. What's a telephone?
Relaxing on a boat can mean wonderful memories.
Ooh, I got one!
But you can't make good memories on the water unless you know how to boat safely. To find out where to take a free boating safety course, call the Boat US Foundation at 800-336-BOAT.
If I'd taken a course, I'd have some better memories.
My next CTL's guest is Mr. Gene Dowd. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit briefly about your boating history?
Well, I've been boating over 30 years. In that 30 years, I started sailing 13-foot sailboats, went to 19, 25, 28, 34, and finally decided to switch to a 41-foot powerboat. I've sailed the local waters, I've sailed the East Coast Long Island waters, and I've sailed the Caribbean, including coming up from Panama to Fort Lauderdale and Fort Lauderdale to St. Thomas.
I see. I understand you have a CTL for us, a true story with a safety message. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I do. I want it, the one that just doesn't leave me alone, the one that bothers me, and it really, I think it should be gotten across to everybody. We were going out on a day like this, very pleasant day, a little bit of a wind in the powerboat about 2 years ago. And as we're going out past the east end of the breaker here, there was enough surf for the surfers to be having a good time. And we looked over, watched the surfers, and there's a man standing in a small powerboat, a small outboard, waving. And as he's waving, I'm wondering what he's waving at, because in front of me, 3, 4, 5, 6 boats had passed right on by him. And he's still waving, and then he starts to scream. So I go over to find out what's wrong. And by this time, we're about 50 yards outside of the breakers. He says his motor's conked out and he needs help to be pulled off the beach, or pulled out of it. I look down from my boat into his. He's got a wife and a 6-month-old baby in her arms. And I said, okay, throw me a line and I'll get you out of here. Now I had to work from the bow of my boat because of the proximity of the beach, so I didn't have a bow line. I didn't have a line to throw him. So I asked for his line. He says, I don't have a line. I says, have you called Harbor Patrol? He says, I don't have a radio. I said, well, drop your hook so I can get myself organized. I don't have a hook.
Hook being an anchor for our non-boating friends.
I said, so for crying out loud, would you put your safety jackets on? He says, we don't have any safety jackets. So I get my wife to immediately run aft, get a line, bring it forward, and after 2 or 3 tries, because of we're now in the swells, we get tied to him, and because of being so close to the beach, I couldn't turn my boat around. I had to go in, bow first, and back out. So now I'm backing out with the weather in back of me, pulling him off a little bit at a time, while his wife is standing in the boat, standing upright in this little boat with the child in her arms, screaming and hollering to where there was just no control on that boat. Everything went wrong. First thing, is he went out with no equipment at all. He hadn't checked his engine prior to his going out. He admitted while he was out there that this was the first time he had the engine in the water for a couple of years. Pardon me, he took a wife and a baby with him. And on
basically a trial run.
On a trial run.
Yeah.
He's out in the swells in a small boat, and a small boat's not all that stable in the first place when you get out there. And the last thing you do when you're out in the swells is raise your center of gravity so that by standing, so that you tend to tip it even further. So to go out unprepared like that, to go out not knowing what you're doing, to go out and do everything wrong, and go out without any equipment, is not my idea of safe boating.
Well, a lot of people just don't realize that. They just think, well, I've got the boat, now I'm going to the islands. And some people might ask, how do you make it move? How do you start the engine? Oh, I don't care about how to operate the radio, I'll figure that one out.
Well, I've had similar
So.
experiences, and it's true. A lot of people think you can get in a boat much the same as they get into a new automobile and just take off. And if anything happens, I pull into a gas station. Not so. I had fortunately, this experience ended safely. We backed them off the beach. The harbor patrol came out, picked them up, and took them in. I never heard any more about it, thanks or whatever. But anyway, just the look on a woman's face was enough to know I did the right thing. Well, the similar instance, just as stupid. We were out in the fog on our way to Anacapa, and we hear this roar come up, and there's an outboard motorboat coming up, or outboard powerboat, and a fellow comes alongside in a deep fog where maybe the visibility was 50 feet. We had our radar going, and he says, "Which way to Anacapa?" And I said, "Have you got your chart? And I'll give you the course." He says, "No, I don't have any charts." And what am I going to tell him at that time? We're in the middle of the channel. I said, "Head for the horn. You hear the horn?" I said, "That's the east end of Anacapa. Head for the horn."
And as you know, sound is hard
Right.
to pick up on out there.
So another case of being unprepared. He just leaned on me like he would somebody along the side of the road or a gas station to give him the directions, and he didn't even have the rudimentary equipment on board to get to where he was going, and in a heavy fog too. So it's a matter of not having the right equipment, not respecting the ocean out there. And respecting the ocean's a piece of cake because you know what it is. It's standard. It's not going to change. You have to be ready for it. And if you don't have the right equipment, you're just not ready for it.
I would say too that people look around in the harbor here, and they see how calm it is day after day, or along the beach. Little waves come in, but it always looks nice.
Right.
And the ocean, once you get away from the shore, is a totally different animal. And people don't realize that. They'll take a little windsurfer and try to go to Anacapa and out to the islands, and hey, it works fine here and close to shore. It'll work out the ocean. It floats. So I would say education is a key cornerstone to safety.
Absolutely.
And being prepared.
90% of the time, the boat will outlast you if you've taken good care of the boat.
Yeah. And if you're prepared. Well, I'll tell you what, we have about a half a minute left.
Okay.
And I'd like to say that I appreciate you and all the members of Pacific Corinthian Yacht Club here, which is a beautiful yacht club.
Thank you.
The facilities here are tremendous. I know you have a jacuzzi, a pool, which makes it more of a family-orientated yacht club.
That's what it was designed for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think this is really beautiful, and I'd like to thank you and all the members for coming and doing these shows.
You're welcome. My
So I
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Ooh, hand me the glass. No, the other one. By Jove, look at that river with the island in the middle. See if it's on the chart.
But sir, I can't read a chart.
Well, then you should call Boat US Foundation's toll-free hotline, 1-800-336-BOAT, and they'll tell you about free boating courses. But back to the island. You wouldn't have $24 on you, would you?
Oh, sir, I'm broke.
Too bad. One day that'll be a bargain.
My next Sea Tales guest is Mr. George Buer. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
Could you give us a brief history of your boating background?
Well, I started out boating back in about 1955. I made the mistake of parking a trailer next to a marina. And before the weekend was over, I'd purchased a boat. And I've been playing with boats ever since. I had a couple of power boats, and the past 17 years I've been on sailboats. I had 2 sailboats in that period of time, and then just in March I purchased a new 34-foot express cruiser that's similar to this boat, not as large, but nice and fast, and it's quite a change from my sailboats.
I notice people will do that, and go back and forth and enjoy both.
It is. Of course, I'm getting older, and the sailboats are getting a little more work. But I'd like to tell about an incident with my new boat.
Your Sea Tail safety, the story with a safety message.
I'm getting ahead of you. I went to Avalon, just kind of a shakedown cruise, and I had just installed a new autopilot. The compass on the autopilot, everything checked out. We set the course for Avalon and came in right on the button, no problem. Just a delightful trip. We came back a few days later, didn't have any problems. And my grandchildren are here from Texas, and we decided to take them to Avalon. So I thought, that's easy. I'll just set the course for Avalon like I did before. And we started out. One of the things I did determine was that my regular compass on the boat deviated about 15 degrees from the autopilot compass, which really didn't have any effect on it. I knew that the autopilot compass was correct because we had checked it. So we start out for Avalon and usually come down the east side of the island or the northeast side of the island. And so we're looking off our starboard bow for the island after about 3 hours, and no island. And pretty soon we discovered that the island is on the other side. We'd gone down the back side of the island. I thought, what in the heck is the matter with my autopilot? You know, it had been perfect the time, only 2 weeks prior. So we start checking, and we realized that when we saw the island, we were within 2 miles of it. Then we decided that, hey, there's something affecting that compass. What we had done is we'd taken the dining nook down in the cabin and placed an inset in there that they make for it and put another cushion in so we could make a place for 2 grandkids to sleep in sleeping bags. Well, this inset had 2 stainless steel bars on it, and they were right over the magnetic compass for the autopilot, which had affected it. And then we started experimenting with our handheld compass. We found out that if we sat close to the side of the boat, the stainless steel bars in the bimini top affected it.
That would be this type of top
like
up
these.
here.
Would affect it about 15 degrees. So then we, sitting on the other side of the seat, only about 1.5 feet away, it would vary as much as 20 degrees. Right, whether you were sitting close to that bimini top or away from it. So we were getting quite an education about compasses. And of course, as I say, we corrected the problem. Coming back, we used a handheld compass and set the autopilot with that. We didn't really discover what was causing it until after we got back at the dock and were playing with it. But
that is an important thing, especially if you have a mounted compass that you can't move, and if it's getting a deviation or not showing a true course, then you have to move what's causing that. Or, of course, you can't move the
you
compass.
hear all these wild tales about the guy that set the beer can down beside the compass and didn't realize it, and he missed the island completely. This we've been hearing for years. I'd never had any problems until this trip. It's part of the shakedown of a new boat. It's like Bill was saying, it's very important to be thoroughly familiar with your boat. I think a guy that goes out there that doesn't have knowledge of his boat and spare clamps, spare screws and bolts and nuts, he's just asking for trouble.
Also, like to go, when you first get your boat, to go through every inch. In fact, I like to go through with a surveyor, you know, because they really know the different parts of the boat or that particular boat. But whereas even sometimes the people selling you a boat don't know or have the time to explain every little inch of the boat.
That's very true.
And look at the condition of everything, every clamp there and how many different size clamps you might need, nuts, bolts, screws, plus how to use your equipment to the maximum. Get the most
I'm
out
a little
of it.
bit of an amateur mechanic and machinist, and I like to find out how everything works. I think I'm pretty familiar with everything on my boat, but believe me, there are a lot of things that can pop up that
they're totally unexpected. Another thing that I like to do, especially if you have a wife or someone that goes out consistently with you, is to make them more and more familiar with the equipment on the boat, the operation of everything, the radio. In fact, I advise that if you're taking a new person out in the water on your boat and they've never been out, or perhaps they're not familiar with your boat, show them where the switches are for the radio, show them how to operate it. Because I've seen mechanics and what have you go on a boat and try to turn a radio or a piece of gear on, and they can't find all the switches. And these guys are experts. And it takes them a half an hour, sometimes hours to do this.
well, every boat is different. My wife practices with our boat, and I feel confident that she could bring it in case anything happened to me, and this can happen too. You never know.
Oh, you could have fall overboard, have a heart attack, or break a leg, or you know, lose your voice.
Just plain fall down.
Yeah, fall down and go to sleep and be hard to wake up. But it's good to train as many people that are on that boat with you, at least the basics of how the boat operates, what makes it move, how to start the engine, stop it, how to operate the radio, you know.
Absolutely.
And another thing,
it's Murphy's Law.
It will happen, and it'll be something.
It will.
And it'll always be something that you didn't plan on.
That's true.
Well, I do appreciate your coming on board, sir, and I hope these stories teach new boating, you know, people coming into boating a good lesson. This has been Captain's Log, Sea Tales. Be safe out there in the ocean. Find out what you can, talk to people, and watch Captain's Log.